Hey, welcome to episode 47 of the Next Step Podcast. What's really interesting is the very first episode we recorded was actually not recorded by us, but recorded by my partner today in ministry and my friend for life, Keanu, Trujillo. So welcome to the podcast. We're grateful to have you with us.
Glad to be back, I guess.
Absolutely. So flip-flop shorts, cowboy boots, and black jeans. I mean, he's the cool guy. I'm just kind of catching up. That's what's happening here. So welcome. We're glad you guys are here. So tell us the Keanu story.
Man.
The Keanu, start where you want to and pick it up. How'd you get here?
We don't have enough time for that story. But I was saying before we started recording, it's rare that you get to see the ripple effects of where you throw a rock into a pond.
Yeah.
And when we did Building Belmont podcast back in 2022, and we did that episode, I had no idea that this was a product of that. So I didn't know that until just 15 minutes ago. So I thought it was really cool to be back here and seeing what you've done with the platform. 47 episodes. You know, on average, a podcast doesn't make it past 7 episodes.
Oh, really? I didn't know
average.
That. We just kind of get old and bored with it or whatever.
Yeah, people, I want to start a podcast, and they think, oh, it's going to be, Joe Rogan or all of these others, and that's not the goal. You know, the goal is you're connecting, you're doing what you're doing, and it's about that consistency, whatever it may be. So a lot of people don't make it that far. So congratulations to you and Brent for making it 47.
Thank you very much.
47.
Brent's right,
by the way,
is what?
47th president.
Oh, yeah, we have 47th president now.
That's perfect.
A lot of you like him, a lot of you don't, but it's all right.
That's
anyway,
all right. That's fair.
We're grateful to have you with us. Brent is very diligent about helping us to do this, and he was like one day, hey, we talked about this a lot, Pastor. We need to do this, so thanks for getting us started. Then you and I sat down for it. We said, let's do this. Let's do it more regularly. Yeah. So tell us about you. Tell us about. So you're not like from Belmont, or are you from Gastonia or Charlotte?
Not. It's funny because I used to tell people all the time I'm from far western North Carolina, meaning New Mexico.
Yeah.
So far west North Carolina, and that's because I've adopted North Carolina as our home. We really have grown to love it. I moved here in 2018 with my wife to work with Elevation Church. Had never been to North Carolina. Didn't even know Elevation was hiring. I'll tell you the story of how that came to be. I was an active duty military when I met my wife. I had started in law enforcement, corrections and law enforcement when I was 18, went into law enforcement at 21, and then I had simultaneously joined the Army National Guard in New Mexico. And I was promoting and doing some cool things there, so I got offered to go active duty with the Guard in New Mexico, which took me to Albuquerque where I met my wife. And the day that I got off of active duty orders was April 1st, 2018.
Okay.
And that was also the day I proposed to Shai.
Okay.
So April 1st, this is the longest standing April Fool's joke ever. We joke about it every year. Like, is this still an April Fool's joke?
Is it on you or is it on her?
Well, I don't know. She said yes, and I asked. I think we can, play both sides of that. But she knew, though, when we started dating that I was starting to feel a call into ministry. And I'm an all in, I'm either all in or I'm all out. I'm go big or go home. And so when I started following Jesus and I was really exploring, what was next for me, I remember sitting down with the pastor and he said, have you ever thought about ministry? And I was just the furthest thing from my mind. Growing up Catholic, I'm like, aren't you born into ministry? Like, there's degrees and things that go with that. Yeah. But I said, no, I don't think so. But I think I was lying to myself. I thought about it more, and I thought, you know what, maybe. And he said, well, if that's ever the case, let's talk about it. So I started doing ministry back home with our church, and I followed Elevation from afar. I loved their zeal for seeing people reached. And it's because I was that person. All of my family were those people. Still, some of them are. And I thought, wow, I love that fire.
Yeah.
So I would follow them from afar, as most Christians do, in their worship and their messages. And one morning, it was actually Larry Bry was preaching a message. And I remember listening to it at the gym, going home, getting ready for the day, and I'm in the shower just crying, listening to him, thinking about how just passionate they are about seeing people reached. And so I told my wife, I got ready for the day, and I was getting ready to go to work. I said, I'm going to apply to Elevation. And she said, like, the Elevation? I said, yeah. She said, have you ever been in North Carolina? I said, no. She said, are they hiring? I said, I don't know. I said, but I feel like that's our place. So I applied.
Wow, it's calling.
They called me the next day. I missed it, so I called them back the day after that. And by that Friday, I applied on a Tuesday. By Friday, they had us on a plane out here.
Wow.
And they said, hey, we want to interview you. This is our last preview weekend. They called it for their hiring process of the year, and we think we might have a place for you. So we flew out here, and I remember driving around Charlotte for those first 3 days. It just felt like home. I felt a lot of peace about it. And when we left, I told her, I said, this is going to be our home. And she said, how do you know? I said, I just have that feeling. It's the spirit. It's the instinct. Wow. And 3 weeks later, they made us an offer. And 3 weeks after that, January, I guess that would be 2019, we were here. So started there in ministry. It brought us to North Carolina. I left there in 2020. Elevation, I call it, was my finishing school. It showed me that I really loved teaching and coaching and building other people. And I met a lot of entrepreneurs when I moved here. In New Mexico, entrepreneurship just culturally isn't a thing. Yes, there are entrepreneurs there. Jeff Bezos is from Albuquerque.
I didn't know he's from
Actually,
Albuquerque.
he is
Really?
born and raised in
Mr. Amazon.
in Albuquerque.
And Washington Post and other things.
But culturally here, everyone you know is in business for themselves to some degree or genuinely entrepreneurs. And I met a lot of those: Summer Wilson, Preston Wilson, John Logan, Q. Nicole McNair. And they all said, Keanu, have you ever thought about starting your own business? And I said, well, one day when I look like you and I got some wisdom and some grays on me, that I'd love to start a coaching business. And they said, well, what's holding you back? I said, well, I was disqualifying myself. I had done a lot, had always had a knack for coaching and developing people. And after they got to know me more, they said, Keanu, you can wait, but you're delaying the inevitable. You think something's wrong with you because you can't stay in these careers for too long. I would always get bored or hit a ceiling and want to move on. They said, basically, this is what they said, this is what I heard. What I thought was wrong with me is what was right with me. And I just wasn't in the right environment to bring it out. So here they really brought that out, that Keanu, you're not meant to be an employee. And I'll say it, I'm a terrible employee. I'm a great builder. I love being led, but I love to have the autonomy to create. And I found that in June 2020, I left Elevation all on good standing. It was time to jump. Of course, this is the tip of the pandemic. Shai was going to school to be a teacher. We had $2,000 in the bank account, and it was that moment, and God said, these are my plans. You just have to be faithful to take a step. I jumped out and I said, I have 30 days to make another $2,000, which coincidentally was basically what we needed to survive. And 30 days became 30 days and became 6 months, became a year. And now still today I do consulting, and that's led to Alchemy Co-work now.
Wow. So there's a lot to that. So tell us about growing up in New Mexico. What was it like to be a kid and getting from there to here? How's that helped you?
Wow. That's the first time anyone's ever asked me that.
Yeah. Well,
it was very difficult where I grew up. Grew up very, very poor. My family was on, welfare, government assistance. My mom and dad were never married. I was the product of a very short relationship, and they tried to stay together, but after about my first birthday, they separated, which was for the best, and separated, they just broke up. And so I lived back and forth between my mom and my dad. And my mom went on to marry a man, and they were a little bit better off financially, but I lived with my dad for the most part. So there were 4 other kids in the household. 2 of them belonged to my stepmom, and then 2 of them they had together, and I was the oldest of the 5. But we were raised very, very poor. I remember I would walk to school sometimes, and I had these shoes that the sole started to come apart. And I just remember walking to school, and it was flapping as I was walking. And I get to school, and I remember a buddy, Austin Morris, I actually reconnected with him recently. He said, hey man, I have some shoes at home. Take the bus with me home after school, and I'll give you a pair. And it was my first Nikes. He had some old running shoes and Nikes, and he gave them to me. I used to have the Shacks.
Wow.
Folks that grew up in having a shop at Walmart remember the Shack shoes.
Absolutely.
And
did they
gave
fit?
those to me. They fit. Yeah.
Oh,
they
wow.
fit. He asked me what my size was, and he gave them to me. And I remember going home. I had my first Nikes, and my stepmom, which we had a very difficult relationship. She didn't like me much, and I didn't like her much either. She took them and she threw them away. And she said, how dare you, this is embarrassing. How dare you do that to us? And I don't say that to demean my family. My dad worked very hard, never graduated from high school, never got a GED. He didn't know how to read. He taught himself how to read as I was growing up.
That's awesome.
Yeah, taught himself Spanish because we worked on a feedlot where everyone there spoke Spanish because most everyone there that worked were illegal. And so just grew up in that environment, which was very limiting. And it was just very different. And I just think I see God's grace on my life because I look at a lot of my cousins are either dead or in jail, all my age, and they're on the other side of the law. And I just see God's grace on my life that he was always protecting me through even my own decisions and my own stupid mistakes, as well as just that environment. And like I said, I honor my mom and dad, and I honor what they were in my life, but they just didn't know any better either. My mom also didn't graduate from high school. She went on to get a GED, but they were just doing the best with what they had. And that's the first time anyone's ever asked me about my childhood.
So you're a man of action, though. I mean, so you didn't stay there. You didn't stay stuck in that. What was it that propelled you out of it?
I think I always had a mindset to be a part of the solution instead of complaining about the problem. For example, when I went into law enforcement, I think my mom always had a thought that, hey, law enforcement would be a good fit for you. And my stepdad worked with the state police, and I didn't want that, but I think she also saw something in me as well as getting into service. So I just, although I made my mistakes, my brother, he found himself addicted to heroin and cocaine. My sister found herself addicted to meth, and thank God they're both here still, and they're productive now. My brother's a truck driver in West Texas. My sister is a dispatcher, a police dispatcher, so thank God he saved their lives. But I was always, my stepdad would tell my mom, that's going to be your success story. And I don't know if that was, self-fulfilling prophecy. I think it was God's grace as well, that I just kind of felt that, like, I know God is calling me to more. And I always believed in God. Being raised Catholic, I knew that there was something out there. So I would talk to him, but I didn't know what it was like to have a relationship with him till 2017 when I met Jesus. But, I just really felt like, hey, I can do more. And for me, I think football was that. Football kept me on track. In school, I was a terrible student. I would test really well, but I wouldn't do my work. I was very lazy in that way. But I knew I had to keep my grades above a certain level to play football. So that kept me going, and I ended up getting a walk-on offer at Colorado State Pueblo, and I went there to play. And in New Mexico, I am a very, very big Mexican. I am very tall in New Mexico.
Big hombre.
All state and all of those
hombre.
things. And so 6 foot in New Mexico, I was unstoppable. But then I go to Colorado State, and I'm woefully average. I mean, incredibly average. Had some guys on the team that were 6'9", 6'8". Ryan Jensen, who was Tom Brady's center when they won the Super Bowl, he was our offensive line captain. He's 6'8", huge, massive guy, and I realized I'm not helping anyone being here. So it was action. It was inclination towards action. So it was football, and then as I was there at Colorado State Pueblo, my sister was arrested for possessing and selling methamphetamine with her boyfriend. She was pregnant at the time with my niece Bethany, and the state came in and took my nephew Adam at the time away and said, once Bethany's born, we're taking her away as well. So Adam went to live with my mom. My sister's going through this. My mom is struggling. And I said, I'm not helping anyone here. I don't know what I want to study. I don't really have a path. I was only here for football. That's not working out. So I went to work. I went into corrections thinking, well, I'm going to go into law enforcement.
Wow.
And I did that till I was 20. And then I went to the Army National Guard. And then I went to law enforcement. And then went into ministry and then entrepreneurship. And then here we are. So it was always that, I think, being open to, although I would get bored easily, being open to, well, what's that next thing that I feel inclined to pursue? And I'm still like that today, except now it's not what I want. I really do rely on, well, what's God really leading me to, and how is he opening up those doors? I heard a great wise man recently, Jason Griffin, say God's calling is always to himself. Because people talk about, what's my calling, as in their job or their career. He said, God's always calling you to himself.
Right.
That's it. We all have the same calling as Christians.
Right.
The method may change, but the calling is always the same. And it was like, wow, that's like language to what I felt. And now it was just that affirmation.
Right. Yeah. That's powerful. Jason Griffin is another person that's helping us in our local area. We need to get to know him on our podcast. So stay tuned. He'll be in their episodes to come.
Have to.
So corrections is something you did for 2 years, year and a half?
Yep.
Okay. And then corrections led you to do?
Law enforcement.
Law enforcement, okay. Fantastic. And then when you're in law enforcement, what was your role?
Police officer, city police.
Okay.
So basic patrol, city police officer. I joined when I was 20. I only had to be 21 when I graduated, or actually it was right after my 21st birthday, and went into that for about 3 years. And then, like I said, I was in the Army National Guard. I was kind of getting bored of city patrol, and then went active duty with the Guard for a little while.
Okay. What'd you do in the Guard?
My MOS, my military occupational specialty, was a 12 November, which is a horizontal construction engineer. And I joined
I'm fixing my watch because people are trying to interrupt me.
That's okay.
And I do not want to be interrupted while you help me. So now we're now uninterruptible.
That's all right.
Airplane mode.
Busy man, absolutely. Sorry. As a matter of fact, I better put, no, mine's on do not disturb already.
Good.
I joined that unit because we were supposed to go to Afghanistan, and I wanted to deploy. I feel like now, as I'm even talking about it and as I've reflected on it, I was looking for purpose. I wanted to be purposeful. I wanted to be helpful. My first legal job was as a lifeguard. I was 17 and graduating high school. I say legal job because I worked illegally with my dad at the feedlot when I was really young. Because I've been this size since I was about 8, so it didn't matter much. Fun fact, I got charged by a bull one time. We'll talk about that story later.
All right.
But my first legal job was a lifeguard, and then it was corrections, and then it was law enforcement, and then it was the military, right? And then it was
So you're
ministry.
always dealing with boundaries and rules and laws.
Yeah, that's true. Funny enough, because I think in a lot of ways I'm very anti-authority.
Yeah.
I was always very anti-authority and yet became authority. But I think I was always just looking for purpose. You know, I was okay with deploying to Afghanistan. I was okay with writing that check and saying I might not make it back, because I would always say when I was young, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of dying boring. I don't want to die a boring way. If I go out serving my country, awesome. Or I bought a motorcycle. If I go out on this motorcycle, awesome. You know, if that be the Lord's will. But I was always looking for that. And I realized I think that's what laid the ground or the foundation to when I finally met Jesus and understood what it meant, is he was who I was always looking for. That was the purpose I was always looking for. But I was putting it in my actions.
Awesome.
And now I just find it solely in my faith.
That's powerful. So how did you translate your life and all those things that you had dealt with? Tell us your story. How did you come to Christ out of all of that?
Well, I think it all translated because, you know, you always have the tendency of thinking that your gifts are common, right? You exist with yourself every day. There's things that you do that are second nature, that Brent does, that's second nature, that you think everyone does this, right? We were just talking about that with Erwin McManus, right? It's just what's natural to you, that doesn't mean it's natural to everybody.
Right.
So one thing that was always natural to me was just talking to people. I thought it was natural that when my dad and my stepmom divorced, and my dad was very depressed, and he went through bouts of suicidal ideation and suicidal attempts, that I was there for him and I talked to him. I mean, I'm 10, 11 years old at the time. And I'm talking to my dad. And then when I'm 16 and my mom and my stepdad divorce and he leaves us and I'm there, you know, she's crying late at night and I'll go into her room and check on her and just talk to her and be there for her. I thought, isn't this what everyone does? And I realize now, no, that's not what everyone does. And also that's not normal, you know, for a child to be doing that. So all of those things, you know, I think I realized that, okay, there's a gift there that God had given me. But back to my dad was my best friend growing up. I remember when I would go work with him on the feedlot, he worked 13 days straight. He'd get every other Wednesday off. So if I wanted to spend time with him, especially if I wanted to escape my stepmom, I would go to work with him. And on days that I would go to work with him, I would shower and brush my teeth and everything the night before, and then I would sleep in my pants and my boots. So that way, when he woke me up at 4:30 in the morning, I would roll out of bed and I'm ready to go.
Wow.
Wash my face, brush my teeth, and get going.
So how old were you then? 8, 9, 10?
Around there.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I took my first paycheck from the feedlot when I was about 8. I worked a couple hours and they said, hey, let's just put him on the payroll and rely on him a little bit more. And I loved that. I really did. I loved working with my dad. I loved spending time with my dad. We would always go fishing, and same thing. We'd wake up real early because you know, got to get him before the sun comes up or as the sun's coming up. And I would do the same thing. I'd sleep in my boots and my sweats and wake up and we go. And so we were very, very close. But when my stepmom left him, it was a very, very tumultuous divorce. She said she was moving to Colorado. She actually took his kids and the 2 kids that he had raised, and she moved to Alabama to be with one of my stepbrother's father. So that broke his heart. And he's thinking, you know, in New Mexico, you don't travel. Alabama might as well have been another planet. Right. He thought he was never going to see his kids again. So he was very hurt. And he had attempted suicide when my mom left him when I was 1. And I knew he was sad, but I didn't realize how sad and what he would do. So one night he didn't want to stay in his room, and he just didn't want to stay there because it just reminded him of her. Well, I didn't want to leave him alone, so I didn't stay in my room. So we'd stay in the living room. He'd sleep on one couch and I'd sleep on the other. And I remember specifically we were watching a documentary about the Arizona Cardinals' new stadium at the time. And we fell asleep. And I woke up my oldest sister, who's much older than I am, who is still around. She was waking me up and shaking me awake and telling me, you got to get out of here. You have to get out of here. And I'm looking around. I don't see Dad on the couch. And I'm asking her, where's Dad? And she said, you have to get out of here, because in her mind, cops are going to come. Ambulance is going to come, and they're going to take you away. My dad had gone into my room with a fillet knife, and he had stabbed himself in the gut.
Wow.
And he had attempted to kill himself. And my sister knew, I got to get you out of here because they're going to take you away. So I ran across the street. She lived about a block over across the street. Didn't even have my shoes on, and I watched the ambulance. I watched the police show up, and I am getting to where this brought me to my faith and how it applied. My dad was my best friend, and he really hurt me that night, because even then I thought, what if she didn't come in? You know, what if she hadn't of, and she just had this instinct. She worked at a gas station, so she said, it was about 1 a.m. She said, I need to go check on them. And she did, and she found him, and she saved his life. And I think she saved my life, because if I would have woken up and went to look for my dad and found him in my room on my bed, he would have been dead. And I think, what was he thinking? You know, did he even think about me? Why wasn't I enough? Why didn't my dad care enough? That was my best friend, that he would leave me like that. And I really, really suppressed that trauma. I hardly talked to him about it because I knew he was ashamed, and he survived, and he's still around today, thank God. And I didn't talk to him about it because I thought if I told him how much he hurt me, he would hurt himself again. And so I always had this question that I carried with me consciously and unconsciously: why would my dad leave me? And if my dad, who was my best friend, could leave me like that, then I can't trust anybody. Why would I trust a friend? Why would I trust a girlfriend? Why would I trust you, Pastor? My dad could leave me. Why would I trust that you wouldn't leave me? And I carried that, and I think I had some destructive tendencies because of that. And fast forward, when I moved to Albuquerque, I had a friend that invited me to church, and I kept telling him no, and I just thought Catholic, because that's how we were raised. That's what church was in my mind. I said no, 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 and finally, he said, Justin Silva was his name. He said, hey, look, they're doing this ministry thing. It's at University of New Mexico. It's a bunch of younger people. There's going to be some girls there. I'll introduce you. He knew how to get to me. And I said, all right, fine, I'll go. Levi Lusko actually preached, who's also from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And he preached, and he just spoke a message to my heart. And that day, I started to get the answer to the question that I had all my life. Why would my dad leave me? Why didn't my dad care enough? And what I learned that day, and the way he was talking about the message too, and how Jesus truly is, a friend that sticks closer than a brother. Our Father in heaven does care about us. And I always asked, why would my dad leave me? And when I met Jesus, I realized my Father never left me.
Amen.
My Father is who sent my sister there that night. My Father is the one that spared my earthly dad's life and gave me another chance, because I don't know what would have happened to me if he would have succeeded. And so I realized, and that Father is who I was always looking for. That Father was the purpose that I was always looking for, and the approval that I was always looking for. And so it just all clicked then, and ever since then, I met my wife, and I found myself here now, and it's just God's grace. I finally had the answer to that question, that my Father was always there.
Wow, that's powerful. We should probably just say amen, say a prayer, take up an offering, and go home, because that is an amazing story. I think it's powerful to think about. Even when you were young, you were attracted to be with your father. And so it's points out important things to those of us that are our fathers on the earth, that we have children that are looking up to us. And we're kind of the first example, for good or for ill, of what our Heavenly Father's about, and the fact that you loved him so much and worked with him. I'm curious, what was your job at the feedlot? What did you do?
Whatever my dad did. My dad was, there was nothing he couldn't do. He would teach himself. He taught himself Spanish, because everyone else there spoke Spanish. And again, he taught himself how to read. And he would go and lay concrete some days. So I'd go and lay concrete. He'd run cattle some days, which is where I got charged by the bull. He would run the feed trucks some days. So whatever he was doing, I would jump in. So I knew how to drive a loader by the time I was 10, was able to do those things. So it was really whatever he did. I'd jump in, I'd do it with him.
You still exemplify that in the way that you do your life, not only in the community but in your home, that you kind of live with your boots on, don't you? You kind of live ready to get up and go, and go early and go hard, and but you're ultimately doing it because you got to spend time with your dad. Yeah. I think if we gather that same kind of mentality, that whatever we do, we're spending time with our Heavenly Father and for our Heavenly Father, man, it just would change the way we do our lives.
It's true. I mean, it is a mindset thing. I wear boots most of the time today as well, because, I would put my work boots on then, and I'd go to work with him. And then in corrections, we wore boots. And in law enforcement, we wore boots. In the military, we wore boots. Yeah. And then I went to Elevation Church, and we wore Chelsea boots.
Okay, cool boots.
Chelsea, cool boots. But then as I started to strike out on my own, there was something about getting up and strapping your boots on that is just a psychological thing. It's like, now we're going to work. So I wear my boots now, and a little bit more, less work and a lot more show now, but still the mindset.
And you help other people do their work too. So tell us about that. Tell us about Alchemy Co-working and how that came to be after your time at Elevation. And by the way, shout out to Elevation, great church that does great things in not just our community locally, but our national community and our world. Just thank y'all for bringing Keanu to us too, among other things, very specifically. So tell us about Alchemy Co-working. Where did you get the idea to do that? Tell people what co-working is all about, that kind of stuff.
Well, Alchemy is, by definition, the process of taking the ordinary and turning it into something extraordinary. And alchemy has a lot of roots tangibly in this scientific study or chemistry study of you could take a base metal and turn it into gold. And it's kind of a little mystical, but obviously we know today we can't take bronze and turn it into gold. But
there's a famous book called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho.
yes.
Is that right?
It is
It's a little spiritual. It's a little...
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it's very rooted in faith. And Paulo Coelho was an interesting character himself. I mean, he was institutionalized when he was young because his parents thought he was crazy and all this stuff, right? But you read that book and you see the journey of faith. And I read that and I was in tears because, again, I see our faith in it. And, and I see the story of Christ in it and what he calls us to. But alchemy being that process is alchemy co-working is actually the alchemy of my journey. And it's the alchemy of opportunity. And what I was inspired to do because I got my start in consulting by being exposed to these entrepreneurs, Summer and Preston Wilson, John Logan, Keanu McNair. I was exposed to them and they gave me my opportunity to get started. And what Summer and Preston did, taking it a step further, they were my first client. So they put first money in my account that said, hey, we believe in your value. We're going to bring you in to work with our businesses. But then about 6 months after I left Elevation, I was working from a spare bedroom at home. And I told Preston, hey, I can't work from home. If you know anyone or have any space that I can use, I got to create separation. Again, back to I can't put my boots on and go into the spare bedroom. It just wasn't the same feel.
Sure.
I needed that discipline. And he said, well, I have a space and you can use it free of charge. He said, as a matter of fact, I'm going to let you use our financial controller to show you how to do books properly as a business owner. I had all of my business funds in a spare USAA account. You know, I wasn't doing my books the proper business way. So he said, I want to let you borrow her and she'll show you how to do it the right way. You can use this space. So he gave me, first of all, they gave me the belief and the mindset that I could be an entrepreneur. They gave me the space. They gave me the guidance. They showed me how to do it properly. And I thought, man, when I become rich, I'm going to do that for other people. I want to show them that entrepreneurship's an opportunity for them. I want to expose them, give them the belief, the mindset, the clientele, the space. And I thought, how can I do that? So I started looking around and I found the co-working model. And I found WeWork. And there's a lot about WeWork. I think everyone, you learn what to do, what not to do. Adam Newman was a raging narcissist, and he wasn't in any way rooted in values and principles. He was rooted in the next thing. It was a house built on sand. So obviously WeWork crashed and it's still trying to recover from that. But there was a lot that he did that I did agree with about creating community, not just selling space, about bringing people together. So I started to look into that. And in 2021, I really started to think, okay, I want to do this. Again, this is very early still out of the gate. And in 2022, I told Preston, hey, I want to do this. And Preston is a developer in the area and built a lot, built William Henry, all the William Henry brands. For those that are listening, you know, Preston was behind that.
Shout out to William Henry Salons and Preston and Summer Wilson. You guys have done a great thing in our community.
And
they're everywhere.
They've naturally cultivated so many entrepreneurs, you know, so many. I mean, even the model of William Henry is about cultivating those entrepreneurs in health and beauty. And so they gave me that start, and I thought, I want to do that for others. They did it out of the kindness of their heart. I want to systemize it and I want to do it. Preston's very methodical though. And I know he loves me like a brother. He calls me the little brother he never had. And yet and still, it just wasn't the right timing. So I continued to work on it. And then come 2023, I said, you know what, 2023, my word is going to be purpose. I am going to make this happen. So I met John Church. John Church started mentoring me. He developed Chronicle Mill here. And he's in another great man, another stage in his career where he said, I just want to start pouring back into other people. Now I built my wealth. I built what I need to do. And I want to start helping others. So he took up the vision with me and stood by my side, and he never left. So then we got really close on a property in McAdenville, and then Preston calls me and says, hey, I love McAdenville. I know you're running into some issues there on getting that building done. I have another building I want you to check out. He said, let's meet in downtown Gastonia. Well, what's funny is when we first moved here, I don't like that brand, by the way, Gas House. I'm trying to change that. But when we first moved here, we lived less than a mile away from downtown Gastonia. And I would drive by it every morning when I went to Luray Athletic Club to the gym. The baseball field was a pile of rubble at the time. And I just remember thinking there's so much potential here. So my vision was I would build the co-working business and then I would take a location to downtown Gastonia. But God saw it that, no, you're going to start in downtown Gastonia. So the whole model is just that. It's about creating community. It's about taking something or someone ordinary and turning it into something or someone extraordinary. And even there, we wrote scripture all on the walls. That was something I wanted to be very intentional of doing. Is I tell believers, alchemy is Acts 2 for business. Everyone comes according to their gift and no one has need. And that's our mission here. So I sell the community and the connection and the purpose. You get space. I'm not selling space and then you get all these things. I'm leading with that intentionally. So we've cultivated that culture there, and now we're looking to expand that and take it to more locations to help other people find that purpose and that calling. God, I believe that entrepreneurship, I think if words, God spoke a word and the world was created, right? That we can do that for those people that are seeking that and really normalize entrepreneurship in that path. For more people who, like me, again, I was a part of a problem. How can I be part of a solution, right? How can I help others find that path like I did?
And you've been fabulously successful. I mean, you have 60 co-owners, 65, what do you call partners?
75 now.
75 members?
75 partners.
I'm way behind. I hadn't seen the sales report in the last couple of weeks.
That's okay. Yeah, we call them.
I wish I was an investor, but I'm not. Anyway.
We call them partners, not members. Again, it's about the intention. But 75 individuals, varying sizes of businesses that are all growing their business in alchemy now in downtown Gastonia.
So I want to ask you two questions. One is, why do you want to change the gas house mantra?
I think it has a negative connotation already, right? And I think it's kind of fun too. And there may be people that are like, I love the name gas house, right? Yeah. But I think
what do you think the connotation revolves around?
Well, it's kind of like the, what it was. And I think where a lot of people still see it in the Charlotte and in the region. I saw that even at Elevation. People were, wow, like there's a bunch of rednecks and hicks out there.
Yeah.
And for me, Gaston County was my place. Being raised in the country and being raised country, I love Gaston County. I love how it operates, and I love the people and how they operate. But I think it has a negative connotation. I think there's something better out there. Like I say DTG, downtown Gastonia.
Right.
We're building DTG, and I'm making merch that says DTG and things like that. Right. Make Gastonia great again, maybe.
I like
it. Things like that that are. I think it has a negative connotation around it. People use gas house and I mean, you can lean into that too. I don't know. I'm not completely unsold. Maybe someone can sell me on it.
Yeah.
You could take that negative and turn it into a positive, which I think some have tried.
Right. It's fascinating. So we got a new name for our baseball team in Gastonia. It's called the Gastonia Ghost Peppers. Yeah. That's cool.
I like it.
You were there at the name unveiling too, right?
That's
cool. There's a lot of good stuff like that related to Gastonia. And I'm just excited to see about how you're taking, and multiple entrepreneurs are taking downtown Gastonia and doing something powerful with it, because it's an incredible city. It's an incredible county, and it's always been kind of the center of the county, except long back in like Civil War days when Dallas was supposed to be the county seat. I don't know if you knew that or not.
I didn't.
Yeah. My wife is a Dallas girl, so they still got the Dallas courthouse and stuff. But anyway, tell us what your vision is for Alchemy Co-working Space. What do you want to do with it?
Yeah, well,
you got it there.
I want to say about downtown Gastonia real quick is, again, you can complain about the problem or you can be a part of the solution.
That's right.
I think that's a message that our especially us as believers, but our country needs is,
absolutely.
What are you going to sit up? My thing about complaining or pointing out a problem is the moment you outsource the responsibility, you outsource the ability to fix it.
Yeah.
So if I say,
because it's somebody else's problem.
Yeah, it's your fault. You did it to me. You're the reason. Well, now if I'm going to blame you, I have no ownership of fixing it. So what did I do? I just handicapped myself that if you're the problem, I don't get to be the solution. Yeah. So that's a problem. Well, then now you don't get to be the part of the solution. But if you can own the problem, now you get the opportunity to fix it. That's the other side of the coin of responsibility.
Yep.
And we just talked with our small group about our fantasy football small group. Shout out Bryce and unpacking it. We talked about that ownership. Taking ownership. It's truly owning it and being a part of it. So people that look at it as a problem or people that see it as an opportunity. So the vision for Alchemy is, one, we are to be salt in our community. We know that as believers, right? But what does salt do? It preserves, but it also makes better, right? It makes a meal better. It preserves, and you think about the times of salt in when Scripture was written, salt preserved meat. It preserved it so it can last longer.
Right.
So in the same way, Alchemy as a business, as a reflection of myself and my partners, is to be salt in the community. We could have the place completely packed with a waiting list and profits through the roof. But if the community isn't filling our presence, then we've failed. So in that same way, we want to carry that salt to other communities, and especially like Gastonia, we want to now circle Charlotte. We don't want to be in Charlotte.
Right.
We want to circle Charlotte because those suburban areas like a Mooresville, a Concord or Kannapolis, Rock Hill, Matthews, those types of areas, people may move to Charlotte initially, but when they settle their family or they want to buy a home, they're moving to the outskirts. And I've done a big demographic study that actually shows that to be true, that people are in those areas. But to get quality co-working like ours, and I mean quality in every way, from the software to the experience, everything.
It really is.
You have to go into Charlotte. Well, not everyone's wanting to go into Charlotte. And we proved it in downtown Gastonia. About half of our partners are people that moved here from the Charlotte area and said, well, I was looking at co-working and I don't want to go into Charlotte and the traffic and everything else. So when you popped up, we had people at the door immediately. And we actually opened with our offices half full. So to be able to take that to those other areas is, yes, to be able to provide that opportunity. We see a gap in the market there, but also to be salt in those communities as well.
It's fascinating to go be part of your co-working space. And we've done a couple of staff off-sites, and we've had some meetings and things there too. But you call your conference room the lab, and there's a backstory to this as well too. But for those people that are watching out there, it's something that I would encourage you to go visit as not a tour site, but an activity site where you can get engaged, because it begins with a coffee shop in front from Wandering Cup, and they do an incredible job just making it possible for you to feel like, hey, this is a cool space and I can have a cup of coffee and maybe a protein bar or something like that. But it also, they're spaces where the public can go sit and work on their computers. But there's also the opportunity to become a partner and to be part of that experience too.
Well, even from an alignment of faith standpoint, Melanie, I met her in 2020. I started coaching and started my business in June. She started Wandering Cup in October, so just a couple months after me. And I always loved to work at a coffee shop. So I remember the first day I walked in there, coincidentally, Summer Wilson said, there's this new coffee shop. Let's go check it out, because we had to have a meeting. Cool. And we walked in there, and I met Melanie, and from day one was just, this is an authentic person that loves the Lord, that's unashamed of her faith. She worked at Billy Graham for about a decade, and there was alignment there. So when I had the vision for this, I knew coffee had to be a part of it, because coffee's a connector. Right. And a good coffee shop environment's a good work environment, vice versa. So I told her, hey, I'm going to do this and you're going to be a part of it. And at the time, she's a good friend. So she said, okay, yeah. Now she tells a story and she's like, yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah, right,
we'll see.
Sure.
And so we were able to make that happen and bring her along. But our relationship is just an example of the kind of relationships we want to create at Alchemy as a whole, to go out and do these things together. And again, as well, you know, I know everyone listening here are believers. Melanie is a firm believer, a firm Christian, godly woman, her and her husband Mike, and invest your dollars there, not at Starbucks.
I love it.
That'll be my one, wag my finger at you all.
There
Invest
you
your dollars with Christian companies.
I love it. I think what's cool about your company, though, is while you are expressly Christian, so also is Melanie, you don't have to be a Christian to come to work in Alchemy, but you encounter Christ there because of the kind of workspace that you've created. I think sociologists call them like third spaces.
Third
and
space.
it's a place for you to be where it's not just a company in a work building. It's not just a social club. It's really more of both of those things are interwoven together. Yeah. And so if you're out there and you're looking for some place to do work in an affordable kind of way, but you need a third space and a separate space than your extra bedroom or something like that, I really encourage you to go check out Alchemy Co-working Space. Although I probably shouldn't say too much. You're going to fill up and run over before it's long, right?
I'm okay with that.
And we'll just move then, right?
Yeah,
or start another one.
Start expanding. Coincidentally, the third space concept is first space is home, second space is work, third space is whatever it may be, right? For some people, it's a bookshop or it's a gym. Well, for us, we're your workspace and your third space. Yeah. So we have the second and third space for you to be able to connect in that way. And yeah, for the most part, most of our partners are Christians. Obviously, that's not a qualifier. I think it's just a matter of you attract who you are. Yeah, right. And so people feel comfortable in that environment, but we're accepting of all people, and they love us for that, and we get to exemplify Christ in that way. That's our ministry.
Right. It's powerful. So I would even say that the ideal third space is what Alchemy is, because it incorporates the first space too, because you feel like you're at home there when you're there. So that's a credit to you and the vision that you have as far as that's concerned.
It's actually perfect though. This building, Smith's Drugs, is what it used to be.
Yeah, I wanted to tell you tell a story about what happened.
Yeah,
so if you're from Gastonia, you know where Smith's Drugs was. That's where this is.
Yeah, Smith's Drugs was founded in 1932, or this location was opened in 1932. It was actually founded out of Greenville, and then it started to expand the territory. And it was open from 1932 till about 2014. So it was a part of the community for a long time. And there are people, we actually have a lot of their pictures on our walls. All throughout the space, you find the history, because we want to honor that legacy and that history. You find pictures of people that worked there. And it was on the lower side of tenure to have worked there for 20 or 30 years. That was on the lower side. We had some people, we had one woman specifically, Nancy, we actually named a drink after her, Nancy Norville. She worked there for over 60 years. Wow. 60 years working at a drugstore. Wow. And I asked the last owner, Mr. Walker, so there was a Mr. Littlefield, who was the original pharmacist who, when Smith's Drugs decentralized and sold all the Smiths back to the pharmacist, it was Mr. Littlefield, who was the pharmacist who owned it, who then sold it to Mr. Kraft, who was a pharmacist who owned it, who then sold it to Mr. Walker, who was the last pharmacist who owned it. And he's still around, and he came to our grand opening, and we raised a glass together, and he still comes around and checks it out. I said, why did people stay so long? He said, because it was family. Wow. It wasn't looked at like a job. It was our community. It was our church. It was our home. It was our people. And I thought that was so fitting, because the same spirit that we want to create had permeated the walls for almost 100 years. You know, so 2032, we're going to have to do something big to celebrate that 100. But, you know, it was already that spirit. And so that's where I see the alignment of how God called us to this building and giving it that life, but operating in the same spirit of community.
Yeah, there's kind of an ethos and an epicenter of what it means to be the three spaces in one. It's powerful.
Yeah.
All right. So how has our church helped you kind of take your next step in your journey with Christ, which is our mission statement, to try to help people take those next steps?
It's interesting because it was my next step, but it was also my first step. When we left Elevation, again, it was all very positive, and they understood my journey, and I understood how they couldn't exist together. But to go back to church there at our campus was difficult, because I had built all of those volunteer teams, and it'd be like you stopping to be the pastor at the Point, but still going there every Sunday, which I know you would,
which will make it hard on somebody.
It's still, pastor, hey pastor, you know, this is going on, or I don't like this new person, I don't like this new system. And so it was difficult to just go there and be a part of the church, because all of the people that I had raised up and built in that environment still kind of looked at me in that way. So that was difficult. So we started exploring other churches, and we went to some around the area, and we were really looking for our next home. And we did go to Elevation for a while until we officially came to the Point and made it our home. But the Point really brought us back to, you know, my wife had been following Christ for a couple of years by the time I met her, and I, of course, was just new to the Lord. And all in, we've only been walking with Christ for 6-7 years, which is still infancy of a Christian, right? And so there was this journey that we kind of felt ourselves, I think, going back into old ways of, well, I don't read my Bible every day, and we don't pray together as much as we should, kind of getting complacent. And the Point, and you, and even this opportunity that we've been in and being able to consult with you all for the last several months, it brought me home. And what I thought was a client or a job, God knew, and I think you knew as well, that it was his way of bringing us back, not to the faith, but back to community, right? Not forsaking the gathering, that, well, we love the Lord, and that's evident, right? But to be a part of that community, the Point is that. I mean, everyone here is so engaging. And again, examples like the Christmas trees, the first gifts that we just did last week. We had planned for 3 weeks to have all the gifts picked up. They were all picked up in the first weekend.
That's right.
This church is very engaged. It is being the church. It's not doing church. It's being the church. And you see it in the way that, and kudos to you all for having the thought of, let's put a playground, let's put a gathering space. We want people to stay here. It's fun to navigate with the parking team, but people stay 30, 45 minutes, an hour after service to connect and to talk and to spend time. And so it really brought us home. You know, it really took us that next step of furthering that this is our home, and the Point is our home church. Yeah, powerful. We're grateful that you've come too. And for those of you that have been to our church, and, you know, you're going like, who's the tall, dark, good-looking guy that's out there, and he's Jonathan. He's very direct. It's not Jonathan too. This is Keanu. Keanu's been for us for the last several months a consultant. Man, we hope that we can make it a longer-term relationship and all that kind of stuff as we move forward too. Well, you're a great recruiter. And the team's been on your side too. It's hard to walk away. I mean, you've created a great staff culture.
Thank you.
I shared with us in the staff meeting this week, I haven't heard my and mine, you know, and I dealt with that a lot and in other organizations as well as my background in ministry. It's my department, it's my kids' department, it's my production team.
Right.
And your team is, no, it's ours. I mean, we are responsible for this area, but whatever helps to serve the mission, Justin, Brittany, Brent, Jonathan, Hallie, Mike, everyone, Wendy, everyone's all in.
Yeah. It's awesome too. You've made us better too, and we appreciate it. So if you see him around, that's what he's doing here. He's helping us, especially in the spaces of first impressions and helping to make sure that we're meeting needs of people that are coming in and getting connected. Even people that have pastoral needs and have care needs. We care about those kinds of issues and how we make it easy for somebody to be prayed for, to be cared for. If you want somebody to be with you in hospitals and that kind of stuff is true. But we also think of our church as kind of a hospital for people that need to come back and get recharged every week and know that it's a place where everybody knows your name and they're always glad you came, like the bar named Cheers. But
it's true.
Ultimately having God at the center of it.
Well, we saw it after Hurricane Helene, and God saw to it that God and the linemen, thank you linemen, that we got our power back the night before. You know, church was we were supposed to do Sunday, and it was always, and you had the conviction as well, unless the building crumbles, we're doing church. And obviously some of that coming out of COVID times is we were going to do it. And we did. And I'm so glad that we did, because everyone that pulled up into the parking lot, you could just tell they were just happy to make it there.
Right.
Like, it's been a long week. It's been hard on all of us. And some of us here locally were affected and impacted. But we all still, our hearts still broke for our neighbors in Western North Carolina. And you can tell everyone just getting there was... It's like a breath of fresh air, and that's what it is, I think, every Sunday. And people are going through real things, a loss of family and loved ones, and obviously that happens all over. But in this church, we're genuinely there with each other through it.
And, you know, there's people that are part of our church and inside of our church whose houses were right on the riverbanks and were flooded because of Helene. And it doesn't just happen up there; it happened to us too. So as a result of that, we might need to schedule another whole podcast to talk about this too. We've become part of doing this thing called Conduit Carolina, right, where we're helping people that are recovering from disaster, and more about that later. But if you see information about that out there, we've sent 50-plus trucks and multiple supplies to all kinds of locations all over the mountains and partnered together with World Vision to do things. Maybe we ought to bring our partners in World Vision and sit down and talk about all this stuff together soon.
Absolutely. Well, as of yesterday, we are officially over 50 trucks.
Fantastic.
Jason and Rebecca, who have been running our warehouse operation, they the whole point of it was to be able to serve specific needs now. And they got a call and said, we need these specific supplies. Well, we look around the warehouse, which now we have hundreds of pallets of supplies that we've gotten from all over the country, and partners like World Vision as well. And they said, okay, great. It's like, load up that pallet, load up that pallet, load up that pallet. They got in a truck, we rented it, and they ran up to the mountains. So now we're able to be that conduit for service. And long term now, it started as, let's get some supplies, let's get them to the people. I don't know, again, I'm all in or I'm all out. And now it's like, let's start this nonprofit. So we officially filed our papers yesterday, and we're going to become a formal nonprofit and continue to be a conduit to service in the Carolinas in whatever form that may be, even after Hurricane Helene is recovered from.
Right. Well, I'm thinking if you're part of our church, you've helped us to do that, funding energy and time and money to help us to be able to make it possible to make that happen too. Yeah. So in the last few minutes we have together, let me throw out some kind of choices for you so people can kind of know the inside. So when you guys see Keanu and Shy, as tall, dark, and handsome as he is, she's prettier. Way prettier. So you're going to want to see her when you see there.
She's proof that I have a good personality.
I love it.
Because she is way too, Brent laughed, she's way too pretty for me.
And she's a teacher at Lowell Elementary School.
Third grade teacher.
Third grade teacher. So thanks for investing your life, Shy, and making that possible. But here's some choices. So I know that you're on an interesting diet right now, carnivore diet. So chicken, fish, beef, or pork?
Beef.
Okay, why?
It's just, I mean, again, being raised on a feedlot, I know what it takes to put a steak on a table. You know, I know that work, so I appreciate it even more. But also, it's just, you know, it just there's something. It's like putting your boots on, having a steak or a pound of ground beef like I did for lunch. It's more satiating. It's actually better for your body as well. Red meat. So look into that yourself. I know your doctor's going to tell you avoid the red meat. Look into it for yourself. Red meat is actually a leading in the proteins.
Where should they go? What website?
There's a really good one. I'll have to have Brent put it in the show notes. There was actually a doctor that did a whole book on it called, now this is carnivore, but even if you don't do carnivore is meat, eggs, butter, salt. period. Meat, eggs, butter, salt. But there was a doctor that did a whole study on the carnivore code, and the book is called, just a moment, and pull up my Audible, because I don't read, I listen to books.
Understand. I'm like that too. I like to listen to stuff on Audible, in my car when I'm running or working out or whatever.
The Carnivore Code by Dr. Paul Saladino, the Carnivore Code, and it'll talk about, and it's great because it's about how this is. I'll really quickly land this plane. It talks about how, in a lot of ways, our food pyramid, we've been lied to. Here's the glaring example. According to the food pyramid and according to these studies, a bowl of Lucky Charms is better for you than a steak.
Oh, wow.
You don't have to be a doctor to understand, okay, that's not right. That's not true, right? It's nothing but sugar and processed food, but it's better for you than a steak because red meat's bad for you, right? And so he talks about how even veggies attack our body because they're high in oxalates. And veggies, as plants, just like any living thing, it defends itself. Right. Veggies defend themselves in oxalates and oxalates in your body that actually can become very destructive. So I started carnivore, and my wife said, "You're going to have a heart attack," because I'm eating, and I'm loving it. I'm eating a ribeye steak and 8 eggs for dinner. She's like, "You're going to give yourself a heart attack." Started feeling better than I ever have in my life. Well, then she started to have some health issues, and she had to go see the doctor and saw these specialists, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. Her kidneys were hurting her, and finally they said, well, let's just put you on this diet, make it very restrictive. And they ruled out a lot of veggies, and they made it very, very strict it was very close to carnivore. And then she said, okay, maybe you're on to something.
Maybe it works.
Yeah.
So you've been in service too. So Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marines?
Army.
Okay,
because go Army, beat Navy. That's coming up this weekend, which Army is looking like they might make it into the playoffs this year. But
they're tough.
Army, I like to work, obviously. So obviously Army. Of course, my family, all of them had served as well. I had an uncle. I had one uncle that went Marines, but I had an uncle that was a command sergeant major in the Army. And I remember growing up, and he would come home from his service. He did several tours in Iraq, and I remember thinking, wow, I want to be that. And he actually pinned me my sergeant stripes when I made sergeant. So Army just runs in my blood. My grandpa was in the Army. My several uncles. So it's always go Army. The granddaddy of them all.
Like it. I always love watching the Army-Navy game. I love it that in that game, all the other college games are canceled except that on that day. It's just about that. So thank you to all those that are in the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and the Marines, or have been there, or Coast Guard and all those other places. Homeland
Space
Security,
Force.
You name it. Space Force, that's right. We got that one coming up too.
We have respect for each other. It's like brothers and sisters.
I love it. Last question. Night person or day person?
Both.
Okay. Explain.
I wake up early enough that some would say it's still nighttime,
Yeah.
It just depends. I mean, there's been times where I just got an itch and I had to build something and on the business side, and I'll stay up all night doing it. And sometimes I find more energy at night. I think it's because the day we're so taxed with, again, your phone going off, my phone going off. And so I like being able to wake up early enough where the world isn't awake yet. Right. And then sometimes at night too, it just hits me. So I would say I'm a morning person for sure, but night or day, doesn't matter.
Cool. Well, whether it's night or day, the world is better because you're up for most of those times. So we're grateful for that.
I can get a good 4.5 hours of sleep and I'm good.
Good.
Yeah. So
good deal. All right. Good deal. I got to have more than that. I don't get a pulse of that 6.5 or 7. Otherwise, my body didn't start up.
Well, yeah. I hope I have the longevity that you have. So I'll have to start to work on that soon.
Oh, you're doing a good job with that. So that's it for this edition of the episode 47 of the Next Step podcast. You guys, when you see Keanu, whether it's at church or out in the marketplace, and whatever the gas houses would come next, GTG?
DTG, that's
DTG.
downtown Gastonia.
All right, DTG. There we go. We got it. We're just make sure to welcome him and share with him about just what's going on in your life and what you're excited about too. We'll see you next time.